the important thing is to keep the conversation between our community and the Nez Perce community that's, as we will learn today, not all in one place. To keep those conversations going. Okay, our guests today are Albert Andrews and Albert Andrews Redstar and Ronnie Redstar. And I'm not going to try to say that Redstar in Nez Perce. He said it so fast this morning and I couldn't. But anyway, some of you know Albert because he spent some time in the Wallowas. It's been some years now, hasn't it? 8 or 10 years ago? Quite a while ago. With the Nez Perce National Park. He was stationed here and spent actually a couple winters here, as I recall. He remembers the winters. And his sister Ronnie is now working. She was a longtime Head Start teacher at Caldwell and is now working for Cultural Resources. And apparently what is a relatively new program, they're acknowledging most of the speakers at Caldwell are Salish, right? But they're, the Nez Perce, of course, are Sahaktu. And so they have divided up cultural resources, and Ronnie is the Sahaktu person for cultural resources at Caldwell on the Confederated. What's the official name?
Caldwell Confederated Tribes.
Caldwell Confederated Tribes. Okay, and so so this is, for me, this is one of the most important segments of this whole series, and that's the Nez Perce in exile. What happened to the Nez Perce after the war, and how they have lived for the last, since 1885. Okay. Thank you very much, and I'll leave it to you. And they have a short little video too.
In Yuma, Kakati out, Waikalo can a bite it, can a need, but Kayokapi, Nunum Houtney and Wataspa. P. Nunum did Lumum to we act, kidding. Houtney and Wataspa, Waikalo. He named Wasmanik, Temio de Dut. Taki, he was a lieutenant man. In our way, we were taught, especially in new longhouses that we would go into as we were brought up, to introduce ourselves in that way. My Indian name, Temio Dut. From there, I would go into introducing my father. His name is Albert Andrews Sr. My mother, our mother, Virginia Williams Andrews. My father's side, Willie Redstar. My grandma on that side, Hattie Andrews. On our mother's side, Charlie Williams, Charlie K. Williams, and his wife, Susie Williams. Not tot, Hiwaka. It's a Pitalik, my father. Ka na eat Hiwaka. Alana Witnat Mai. I always flubbed that, that's why I turned it on. Chitsayo il ka na el hiwaka kataya ka na plach na plach hiwaka timyautitut ka na kat hiwaka alemtai. That's our grandparents, our mother, our father, and our grandparents. Beyond that, we would name all those who came before. Why we were taught that way was that anywhere in the group that would gather, they might perk up when they hear a name. Oh, I'm related to that man, or I'm related to her. So when we finished, they would shake your hand, and man, sometimes they would shake your hand just hard. Like, you're related to me now. And they would tell me why or how, and share that with us. So in that sense, we made connection to all those people. That was how we introduced ourselves. I just started meetings with our group. We're trying to rebuild our longhouse. So before we go, there's going to be a basket out here, and we'd like each of you to donate $200. I'm just kidding, actually. And I usually start meetings, we used to start them with singing and a song. What I'm going to do is just recite, and we'll finish with a song and a prayer. And it'll be more fitting. I made a mistake. And you can see it in the way we're dressed. Veronica is dressed in the way we dress when we do ceremonials and gatherings that are specific to our people. First fruits, burials, those special kinds of times when we all come together for certain kinds of things. This is the manner in which they all dressed or clothe themselves. This is the way when we're orangutans, we run around the community, this is the way we dress. The closest I come to that is my medallion. This is Soyapo's vest, white man's vest. In a giveaway of an uncle who we just buried recently, I received this as one of those things that are handed down from each of the ones who are deceased. They take the gatherings and those are put under one covering. Then at the end of the burial, these things are handed out to people that come. A lot of times relatives receive special kind of nod. This used to be his bell bag when he traveled. So I kind of wanted to use it today. His name was John Grant. He's a Korean War veteran, and he served as a medic on the Korean front. So he has a special place in our heart. And so I wanted to bring that down in a sense to honor him, because we're going to be looking at Veterans Day very soon. So these are the ones that he used when he traveled. I generally used a different kind of bell, it was a little louder, but generally I'll use this one. We talked it over, and I've become more familiar with historical things, even though we've both been schooled in how it was for us. So I'll talk in specifics about our, in a sense, our removal from here into the Caldwell Tribal Reservation, Caldwell Indian Reservation in northwest Washington. I'll give you some of the historical aspects of that, and then segue into how it is for us today. And then my sister will stand and I can help her out. And the reason I'm doing it that way, or we're doing it that way, is my sister was recently hired, and the titles vary depending on who you talk to. She's the cultural heritage representative of the Nez Perce tribe, or she's a coordinator, or she's a facilitator. But this is Veronica Andrews Redstar, my full-blood sister, and I'm going to ask her if she doesn't mind, she can go ahead and sit down, but she'll be standing during that time. I'll make her stand. By the way, there's a side thing to this. She was down here earlier, I'm going to tell on her. And they decided to ride horses. And the horse she was on balked, and she went off. Fractured some ribs. So in a way, she's coming back from that. She had 6 fractured ribs. And so now she's been allowed to travel. She's been allowed to even drive. I'm not going to let her drive this trip. She's still getting used to this stuff. So that's a little bit of a background for her, and she'll get into it further when she steps up. Kete out. Nunam Lautewa, my friends. Enim Himnuma, my relatives. What I would say is, Enim Himnuma Kalautewama, my friends and my relatives, or my relatives and my friends. Kete Kinahau means Pawataspa. This is sacred land to us. Kahau means Lahaipa, sacred day for all of us, especially when we come into this country. When I was hired by the National Park Service a few years ago, I had never been down to the valley to any degree or extent. Our parents would come down and celebrate with what they call the Joseph Days. They would come down here, they'd go powwowing and dancing and whatnot. They did that quite a bit, and they had a lot of stories to tell when they would come home. And oftentimes, I would just hear about it, or we would just hear about it, and wonder about that faraway place. When I was hired as a liaison member, there were 4 of us picked when the National Park Service created the Nez Perce National Historical Park. Additionally, our mother stood up and voiced word against the formation. Her reasoning was she didn't want people traipsing around in our sacred country, digging up bones and digging up artifacts to sell. She said, that's not our way, so I don't want this to happen. They took a vote. The ladies who had stood up with her, supported her, they won that day. Well, Frank Walker, who was the superintendent at the time, Alan Slickpoo Sr., who was a relative of ours, who accompanied him then, they went home and went back to Spalding and Tlapoy, Idaho. They didn't give up. They came back later, I don't know how much later, did the same thing, called them all together. It just so happened that our mother and a few other ladies weren't there. They took another vote, and those guys weren't. So lo and behold, we're now part of the Nez Perce National Historical Park. So I was part of a group of people, 4 of us, were selected to be part of the liaison to create the plan, the general management plan. My first look coming into this valley, catch. Never been here. So I'm looking out the side of the van, and there's this red rock, and I'm starting to cry. Then, as now, I had trouble. I had to look out the window. I could hear the people talking behind me inside the van. This would be the first time I would actually see the Wallowa country. Remembering all the stories. You see the fields outside Wallowa. You see the streets going into Wallowa, going through Wallowa to Wallstein, coming to Enterprise, and eventually to here. I don't know how long, I don't remember how long it was we spent here. We had meetings and talking about the plan and whatnot. But I remember that. To this day, the crying. And realizing, this is my home. This is my ancestral home. And lo and behold, they hired me. later on when they advertised the position. And I became kind of Tim Nitz's right-hand man. I don't know if you know Tim. He's an orangutan himself. So. We became good friends and we had a lot of discussions about this country and about our feelings about the country. And I told him, recited the history of how it was for us when we went back, for our people. And I said, what I learned, they fought like everything, especially Chief Joseph. Taught and taught and taught. And eventually he was allowed to come home. But not come home. They sent him to Pacific Northwest Territory. It happened to be the Caldwell Indian Reservation. In 1885, when they got sent back from Indian Territory, there were about 300. A little bit over, give or take. There was a little bit of discussion about where it was. Some say Wallula, some say Raparia. Nevertheless, they made the choice to split. Almost even. 150, 152 went to Lapwai. The rest went with Chief Joseph. Because they gave Chief Joseph no choice. He wasn't going to be sent back to Lapwai. He wasn't going to be allowed to come back here. He was made to go to Caldwell. So those people who were loyal to him, Yellow Williams. I'm old, so I'm Chaz Williams, not Yellow Wolf. Anyway, Chushla Mukmuk is his name, Yellow Wolf. That family, they're Imnaha people. They were loyal to the chief, so they went with him to Caldwell. But they didn't actually go to the Caldwell Reservation right off. They went to Fort Spokane on the Spokane and Columbia River. They were housed there for one winter. Some of them did starve. They were really cold, having survived coming back to the Pacific Northwest for the first time. There are stories about them being there. The commander of the facility, of the fort, took some rations of their own and provided it to the people. That kept many of them from starving. He was angry with the Indian agent who was stationed out of somewhere nearby, but apparently wasn't as attentive to their needs as needed to be. So he helped them survive. We lost a grandparent there, and she's buried in that area. There were a number of our people who died and buried on the Fort Spokane area. The way it worked amongst our people and other tribes, there would be allies created, sometimes by intermarriage. It just so happened there was an intermarriage occurred between the Nez Perce group and the Moses band. Chief Moses, some of you may know of this man, they allied in that way because there was that intermarriage. Through that relationship, he invited him back to the Nispelan area, and that's where we call home. So our people were taken up and moved to Nispelan. In the town of Nispelan, you can see houses along the creek called Nispelan Creek. My uncle used to laugh because they would call it Nispelan River. And he'd sit there and he'd just chuckle. The river? And it used to be a place our young guys used to fish all the time. We could swim there and everything until they put what we call the Poop Lagoon in nearby, and it contaminated the creek, so we never fished there again. We don't swim there anymore. It's the way of things. They were placed. There's a book or a story written by Charlie Erskine Wood. a son or grandson of his went to live. And the boy he ran around with, who gathered horses with him, was my grandpa. He would gather horses and bring them in and take care of them. And he wrote about that time that he spent with our people, spent with the Joseph people. I don't remember the title. Some of you may know it better than I. But that's where we hear a little more about what life is like. They would encamp there on the Colville. The main living area during the winter, summertime was up in the area of Nez Perce. In the wintertime, they duplicated what they used to do here. They'd go from the upper reaches of the valley down to the lower reaches where it's protected, near the creek or rivers down below. So what they used to do is leave from the Spelem, go all the way down to the Columbia. And there's a spot, we can pick it out, where they set up the encampment for winter. And that became their winter home. So they migrate between the two areas. So they kept up this movement from back and forth, wherever the game was plentiful or wherever it was warm, to protect them from elements. So they kept doing that. During that time, the government provided materials so they could build homes. There was a mill built in the town of Espila. So the houses were built. The chieftain had one house, but he never lived in it. He stayed in his camp. Some of them thought, oh, he's just staying a blanket Indian, here for the new, more modern way. No, amongst us, even in our birth, when we came around and came into the family, we would hear the notion, we're going to go home. Someday, we're going to go home. And growing up, I used to wonder, well, where's home? This is home to us. That's beautiful. But this is how they took up living in the town and began to replicate what they had done in Oklahoma Territory. They had good cattlemen down there in Oklahoma Territory. They raised horses, amongst other livestock, and began to pitch in and dig in and begin to thrive. They did the same thing in this field. They became ranchers, horses, cattle, doing whatever to get by and to prosper, and began to rejuvenate. Before that happened, however, the chieftain, we've heard many stories about this, called the headmen together. This is not long after they got there in 1885, and talked with them. Says, we've come a long way together. Look around you. We've lost many people, many relatives, many friends. We need to let that off. We need to come back together and stand up. Patapaloini. Make them happy, make them rejoice. So, I was talking to Rich. There's a book called With One Sky Above. And there are many pictures taken by the doctor who was there. One of the pictures he took was of the Nespelem Valley. He's up on the hillside. He took this panoramic picture of the encampment of our people, our ancestors. There's a big encirclement, and it was called together specifically for this. In those days, the Soyapo, the white people were threatened whenever native people gathered in large numbers. That's why they ended up praying on Sundays, because that's when a lot of people gathered together to pray. So our people became what they call Sunday Indians. We began to pray on Sundays as well. We still carry that out today. But that's from where that began. What he wanted to do would call for them to be a big gathering. This is a picture, I don't know how to say it, Quebec. But there's a picture in here of the encampment area. In the other book, it takes up 2 pages. And we can pick out what Oh, this is where Casey's store used to be. Oh, this is the road that goes to Gold's Lake. We recognize the features of the territory of the country. We know where this used to sit, right near the town of Nez Perce. There are other pictures included in there. In his book, With One Sky Above, he talks about men's and women's division and call it like a parade. We didn't call it a parade. Okakehanaka mitate, go around 3 times. The first time around, we had a man in front speaking and calling out. And as he went around, he would mention the words, the names, while he was talking. And we witnessed this when we grew up, because we went to the same ground that they have called the Nespelum Celebration Grounds today. I remember sitting on the side of the road hearing them come, hearing them do the same thing, talking, but they were calling out names in Indian. It was said that you could hear them crying as they went around. You could hear the different camps break out. You could hear the weeping all the way around this encampment area. We have a thing that we do after a burial, where they call shaking hands. The body goes into the ground. Our concentration is on that burial, on the body that's leaving, no longer here with us. But there's a process we follow that we hope will strengthen the family that's left behind. We will greet the family, and then a speaker will step up and begin to talk about it. What happened? What were you doing then? Do you remember when the call happened? All those kind of things to trigger that sorrow. That's what he was doing, going around that encampment. I found out later what he was saying was all those people that were killed in the Battle of 1877 during the war. From the time of the Clearwater to the Big Hole to the Bear Paw Mountains. Everyone who was killed and was left out there on the trail. It was those names he was saying as he went around. And it was those families that were reacting by crying, weeping for the people they had lost. Almost all the way around on the second one, same thing. Finally on the third, picked up the pace and began to move and gallop. And now you could hear them. Patapoiloini. Now we're rejoicing. Look around you. These are the people who were with us when we were out there. We're together yet. We're alive today. Rejoice together. Now stand up. Shake each other's hand. We're here today. That was our memorial. That's how we do memorial. Take care of the pain that's inside and bring that out. But also teach them how to take care of that in the days ahead. That is how they took care of us and what we teach to our children today. Those were amongst the first things they did in the town of Nespelum. They settled down, and there's a lumber mill that's in the town of Nespelum where they cranked material to build a big home because not all the people had houses to stay in. So they built this big home in Nespelum. You can see it just south of the town. There were 5 families that stayed in this home. And others were homes like Chief Joseph, and different ones had their own houses along the creek. Eventually, those people either moved, got their own places, or they died. So you had a vacant building. Well, they liked to gather and dance, and sing old songs they used to sing, what they call powwow today. Do ceremonials, and we had different It wasn't all contest back then. They were talking about things when they danced. They told a story when they danced. There were things that they showed you when they were dancing. That's what those things were for. Today it's all powwow, how much money you can accrue, first, second, and third, best dancers, and best regalia, and things like that. This is what it's turning into today. This is what we call the commercialization of our traditions. But that's how it began. After those people left then, that's what they began to use for longhouse. Became the longhouse for activities. They'd hold root feasts there, they'd hold services there, but it became a central part of life on the reservation. We came along, born to our mother and father, Albert Andrews Sr. in Virginia. Albert was a veteran who served in World War II. He was on a destroyer escort, served in the South Pacific. And I found a logbook of his. I didn't know that was what it was. It was a little book about 8 days. Found it in the sewing machine. So you know the Singer sewing machines? That little thing. I was home alone one time. I started digging around. Don't leave kids alone, by the way. They can dig into things. And I used to do that. And I found this book. In there, he talks about the smell. And as I read further, what he was describing was the ship going closer to the beaches at a place called Taro. He said we could see them hitting the batteries on the beaches. We'd both go in and you'd pull back out. You'd go back in and you'd shell some more and you'd pull back out. But he said you could smell the bodies that are floating in the water. Then another batch of Marines would go in and they'd land. The places he named was Tarawa, Peleliu, and Iwo Jima. He was there at those places. On little tin cans, they call it. Little destroyer escort. Somebody had, I'm big in Facebook, I'm retired, by the way. Addicted, sorry. But I started reading, somebody posted a picture of a destroyer out in the sea. Oh, that thing was bouncing up and down. You get seasick if you watch it too long. But I used to think about him on those ships, on that ship. My father, our father. He died when I was 10. So in one sense we grew up fatherless because he had died in an accident. He was coming home from work, car stalled, had to back up. In those days, the practice was you'd open the door and you'd lean out, watch where you're going. Hit a rock, fell out underneath the tire, broke his ribs, and he died. So in a sense, our mom raised us. Talk about strong women today. That's how we remember our mother. I'll always remember and was proud of her when she stood up and said no to the park because of the various reasons we had. One of the things I remember, they would take us, Kata and Balaka, because we did a lot of things with her mom and dad. Kata and Balaka were big in our lives. Maternal grandmother and maternal grandfather. We have relatives in Umatilla, in Yakima, Nez Perce country. We have a lot of relatives in those areas. Now we're getting quite a few in this feeling because of intermarriage. But most of our links are with Sahaptin-speaking people. We can speak and understand Ichiskeen, which is spoken by the Yakima and the Warm Springs, and a little bit by the Umatilla. But we can also speak Nimiputimp, which is what they call Nez Perce. One guy asked, where did this word come from, Nimipu? I never heard that. We always heard Titokan, and that's what we heard. Titokan is Indian. Titokatimki is speaking Indian. That's what we grew up hearing. So Nimipu was a new phrase for us, and it's kind of new to us. but Nibiputimtis Nez Perce, speaking Nez Perce. So we have relatives in the Nez Perce country, Umatilla country, and some in Yakima, all because of what happened in 1877. We've now met people who come down from Pincher Creek and talk about the weeping. These are the relatives that are descendants of those who escaped from the Bear Paw battlefield into Canada. They're chiefly from Whitebird's band, but they're still relatives of ours. We've met them. They're up near Pincher Creek and various parts out there. We have a friend who is Colville. He's a bigger orangutan than me. His name is Randy. He used to come to the Longhouse a lot. He'd kid around with the elder ladies and they'd tease him about different things. But one time he came back and he said, you know, I've met some people dressed just like you guys, wearing wing dresses. They have different services, and I went to their services and listened to them talk and sing. They talk and sing just like you folks do. They live up there in Canada somewhere. My guess was he ran into those people at Pincher Creek. Because when we met them, yeah, some of them still tried to carry on, some of them could speak a little bit of Nez Perce. We've renewed that relationship and friendship over the years now. We plan to go visit them someday. But all this came about because of 1877. This is how we grew up in our home. Our mother raised us. We got educated. I have a degree in English. Weird. But it wasn't because of the grammar. I hated grammar. But it was because of literature. I really enjoyed reading literature, even Shakespeare. I enjoyed the heck out of Shakespeare. I got what he was saying. I got all those people who wrote. And then I learned about native writers. And I got even more because I could relate to what they were saying. But we're all moving along. We have grandchildren. I'm way behind my sister. I only have 7 grandchildren. She has about 45 or 50. But we have families that are beginning to thrive and deal with what they need to deal with. And we'll get into even more what it is like for us then, today. What I'm sharing with you is some of our experiences, what we remember and were told as we grew up. And one of the significant ones was when we would go to Umatilla. I remember one day, we all showed up at this house, we all got out and it was quiet, kind of a solemn thing. Palaka, kata, mom, they all went in. Made me stand with mom when we walked in. Palaka in front, shaking hands with all these people. But we had to stop at the door and we kept going one by one. I had no idea what was going on until I got inside. What they were doing was shaking hands with all the people who were gathered. They were in a room, maybe not this big, but they were sitting around the walls like that. And they were shaking hands with all of these people. After we all went through, we all sat down. Then I assumed him to be the head of the family or whatever. He stood up and began to talk in Indian. What I described to you about them crying, he was doing that thing. And he would say names, and I could hear them beginning to cry. What he was relating was all the relatives that we all had. Those who are still out there, they're buried on that trail. from the time they left the Wallowa country, our homeland, to the Clearwater, to different places where the battles occurred. Big Hole, which was very tragic for a lot of us, on into the Bear Paw battlefield in Montana. He was reciting those names again. And then recent ones who he'd lost. I didn't know that at the time. They were crying, so I cried, never understanding why. But what struck me in all that was, and we're never going to go home again. And I remember thinking, but we're going to go home. When we leave here, we're going to go back to Nez Perce. You guys are home, so where's home? Mom or somebody told us later what he was talking about was Wallowa country. Just, we're not going to go home again. This is where we are. Come to find out, we're over 300 some miles away. It's about a 6 to 7 hour drive for us one way to get here. So we're not here for all the meetings that you have concerning our people, simply because some of those just can't make the trip because of weather, whatever. But we can't come down here with the regularity that they can from Lapwai and from Umatilla. Accessibility is a little bit difficult to come by. So when I hear the phrase, welcome you home, I kind of, yeah, right. We come down and dance for you, then we're going to go home. I agree with the sympathy and the empathy. But the reality is, we don't live here. But this is where our ancestors lived. I had a bone to pick with Rich, and I've voiced this with him before. I told him, you're touting Alvin Josephi. And yes, I agree, he's famous for his writings. He does a good job. But in that book, the big one, as inclusive as it is, as detailed as it is throughout the whole thing, you come to the end and you talk about the Nez Perce, but he talks about the Lapwai Nez Perce, about their government, about how it is for them today, their programs, this and that. And oh yeah, there's a bunch from Nez Perce, they're from Wallowa, maybe a couple pages. But for the most part, it's about the Lapwai Nez Perce. So the attention shifts to those in Lapwai. Whenever anybody talks about the Nez Perce, they go to Lapwai. When they want to talk about Chief Joseph, they go to Lapwai. Our chieftain is buried in Nez Perce. He was rejected for coming down here to create a homeland. He was rejected by his relatives in Lapwai. So he said, okay, that's it. I don't have relatives down there anymore. The reality is, in blood, we do have relatives. But because of those rejections, they got inward in a sense. And so we carry on those things today, knowing these things in our history. We have relatives on the Umatilla. We have relatives in Lapwai. We have relatives in Yakima. We have relatives in Canada. We are the Joseph Band of Nez Perce. And now we're going to have voice. And we're thankful that you invited us down here to share that voice with you. This is who we are. There's coming a day when we're rebuilding our longhouse which burned down a few years ago, to bring those back again, the things that we exercise, the way we pray, the way we gather for the ceremonies. We're looking forward to that day. But a few weeks later, I'll be taking the name of my grandfather. I've already let some know, but I hadn't planned to announce it, but that's what we're going to do. So you'll have a time pronouncing my name then. See, we were conjecturing how that Andrews came about, and like Veronica pointed out, those guys who were doing the census rolls for our people way back when couldn't say that. So, you're now Andrews. So, my name is Albert Andrews today. But my Indian name comes from my grandfather's side, other side. So I'll take it the way we're taught how. I'll take my grandfather's name now. So someday, we do as much as we can to maintain what they call old teachings, old ways. I don't know how much more time. Just about done. I'm getting better. Don't put me near a microphone, I'll talk for 2 hours. But one of the realities, and we'll get into this more when Veronica steps up, we follow what we call the Wallowas. The Wallowas describes a thing that's done on a prayer form. They're dancing. You might have heard the Umatillas talk about the washat. Washat is Ishishkeen for the same thing, dancing. And it describes the activity that's being done during what we call 7-drum service. That's the Wallowas to us. It's the washat to the Yakama, the Umatilla, and the Warm Springs. That's what we began to follow. Some say we took the belief from Smohala, was one of them. We said no. Our elders tell us no. We were already doing this before Smohala came along. Smohala came along with the belief, and the way they exercised it as one of them was to pray that all the white people would leave our country and the land would return to us. That's what the chief prayer was during those gatherings. I once wanted to sit down with Rex Buck, who's now the leader of the Wanapums, and ask him, when did that fade out of how you do things today? Because now we're needing to accommodate the way things are today and maintain old beliefs. But that's what we exercise, our people gathered. There's even documented evidence that we carried this on, even during captivity, as they call it. A soldier wrote about seeing those Indians standing out there in this area. He said the men were lined up with drums, hand drums, and they were drumming and singing. He said the men were on one side, the women were on the other, and they were singing these songs. What he was describing was the Wallowas service. And that's how he carried in the longhouse. The men would seat with drums and we'd sing 7 to 12 songs. Women on one side, men on the other. Not so much that we separate the two, but we acknowledge the strength of both. Because the prayers are just as strong from both sides. Sometimes one is stronger than the other, sometimes the other is stronger. But we have things that we carry out in that home that acknowledge that balance between us. And then we live a shared life together. That's what it represents to me. It may be differently, seen differently by others, but that's how I see it. And the leadership isn't something we are ambitious for. I never wanted to become a leader of that longhouse until a guy approached me and said, okay, I think you need to step up. So I'm going to give you a bell and you're going to be standing next to me, because he was leading some services at the longhouse. He took me up there and made me stand right next to him while he led services. He says, you watch me. You remember what I do, because you already saw it with your mom and your palaka. That's how I became leader of the longhouse. After a time, we switched places, and I began to lead the services. Talk about scared. We have relatives who do the same thing on other reservations. Once I got used to doing it at home, and I got comfortable with people at home, and oh, this is okay, then in walks a leader from a little longhouse, and I go sweating again. They're going to be, they'll pinpoint, oh, he's not doing that right, or no, he's not doing it the way you're taught. But they'll all come up to me later and they shake my hand, good service. So often I tell myself, good, I made it so far. But I retired and I had a problem called labyrinthitis. I get extreme vertigo when it first hit. I had 5 episodes. I thought I was going to die. But the consequence of that is I can't handle the drums in my ear. I get dizzy. I've tried it a few times too. I've even tried facing this to the drums and it still hurts. So I've had to step back. And from what I'm hearing, it's beginning to hurt inside the services. Because there's a way we're taught from the time we're children about how to behave with one another, with our Creator, and with all the things of creation. And one of the things that stands out in that creation is fellow man. You treat people well. You treat them with respect. You treat them with care no matter who they are. It can be your enemy, but you treat them well. It is said that person you had animosity with throughout life, that should not keep you away from going to their burial. You should go there and be there because you're making connection. Help them carry their way to the greater place. So that's what I remember about what I was taught. That's what it stands for me. But what they put us into was a nation that was converted. The interior sailors from the Colville Indian Reservation were heavily inundated with Jesuit priests and all those people who came into the country to convert them. We had our experience with it at Spalding. The Presbyterian faith is very strong down there today. But up that country is Catholic. And so here we are. We were called heathens. We were told we're not going to go to heaven if we don't accept Jesus. We're still told that today. That's our reality today. They're beginning to accept because of what's going on in the country. The Idle No More movement's touched off things in Canada. Standing Rock stands as a symbol for us to begin to stand up in a different way. Now I hear different ones on the Colville Reservation say, you guys are strong, maintain. Yeah, right. A few months ago you might have said, you guys are. So it's changing a little bit. But that was our reality. And that's the way it was for us today. So, once again, thank you, Rich, for inviting me down. Thank you to my sister for coming along. Because she's got a lot of things to say about what it's like for us. And like I said, she's getting used to doing this kind of thing. Because one day she'll be the one that will be doing a lot of this kind of thing, talking about our history. But I thank each and every one of you for being here and to listening to us. Like I said, what I'd like to do, and I talked it over with my sister, is we'll finish with a song and a prayer. Instead of opening things with it, we'll close it, and we'll hopefully in a good way.
So Albert, could we break now and eat lunch?
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
As they say in the longhouse, the floor is yours.
Ketiao yau ki ini bimyuma. Ini was winit aluyat mai. Today I want to thank you for having us come here and share our story. I know that When I saw the outline of all the presenters, I had wished I could come to each one of them, because a lot of times I don't hear, other people's perspectives on what had happened to us as a people. I'd asked that some of these pictures I wanted him to stop at. I wanted to share who they were. This is our Kalatza. And this is our paternal grandfather. And this is the name that Albert will be taking, our grandfather's name. It's T-U-Il-Il. This picture here, we had taken it out before because our people, we don't believe in taking pictures when we're having service. It's a very sacred thing to our people. But this picture was taken and put in the National Geographic. One of our cousins stopped by my house one day. His name was Phil George. He stopped by and gave me a copy of this book. But we used this picture and this entire production that was put together for AT&I. We were trying to generate some funds to rebuild our longhouse. This picture is of my mother, or our mother, our aunt, Ida Dizital. In the back, you can see our other aunt, Agnes Davis. And you can't see Ann George, who was a Cleveland Kamaikan's daughter. But the information I wanted to share today was going to be only of the things that I experienced. I had no clue what I was going to talk about. My nephew, Dewey Davis, was going to be the presenter today, and he could not make it. I received an email from Rich, and he told me that he had put me in his place. So thanks to Rich, I'm here today. I read through some information, and I thought, no, I can't, do a cram course or kind of learn what other people wrote. But I think, with Albert and him being my valuable resource, I've learned a great deal from him. But not only that, but from our Katza, who was our maternal grandmother, and our mother. They've shared a lot of stories, but, and I might get emotional because I think, when you talk about experiences that your parents or your grandparents go through, it is so close to the heart. When Albert was talking about him coming into this valley, Albert brought my Aunt Agnes and I down here for a visit. It was near this season because there was snow here. As we were coming here, I did the same thing as Albert. I started getting that in my throat, and I started to cry. And just that feeling of coming into this valley really touched me. To actually be here, to actually experience some time here. And the feeling that I want to talk about is our Katsa, our grandmother. She lived with Joseph in his camp. And she had hurt her leg, and he nursed her back to health. She said she was a little girl, but she remembers that time. And the thing that she talked about was they always had in the back of their mind, one day we're going to go home. One day we're going to go back to Wallowa. And there were times that she would go to what we called a wicas. It's where they kept all their belongings, things they received from people who passed on, or things they received from others as gifts. But she had quite a few items that she was gifted that were Joseph's. And she would go out to the wicas. And I'd be playing outside, my sister and I, and we would hear her weeping. We'd go peek in there and to see if she was okay. And she would be holding things. She mourned. And so those are so real to us. And she said they always longed for that time. She watched the people before her mourned the loss of a lot of people that they traveled with, a lot of relatives that were lost. One of the things that I recall of recent was looking through my mother's things. I inherited a lot of things when we cleaned her home. Upon death, you clean everything out. We cleaned her entire home and all her belongings. I haven't looked at it, but maybe a year and a half ago, I was looking through her stuff. And it took me that long to even look through them. She passed in 1986. I was telling Albert I found this letter from Alan Slipprue, Sr. He had written to our mother. He said, "You know, relative, although I am here in Lapway, and I'm on the NEPTEC board, I want to share with you my belief, the belief of Chief Joseph and your people." He said, "I truly believe that you are the true Chief Joseph members, that he is your chief, he is your leader. And our people here have no right to continue to use his name. We've generated a lot of things because of his fame. And this is one of the teachings that we've always received from our elders, our Katsa. Don't ever use his name for fame or for that money. We've never shared his name again. But that was one of the true teachings of our people. One of the things he put in that letter was, from history, I do know that Joseph was kicked off this land in Lapway because he would not convert. Joseph said, "No, I'm not changing." I want to keep my way. And those that wanted to follow this faith we call Wallowas will go with him. And because of Moses, Chief Moses, he opened up his home, invited Joseph to come and stay. And what was difficult for us as we were growing, and even today, the people of the Caldwell Reservation wonder what we're doing there. They wonder why we're there and how did you get here. And some of them are very jealous, I would say, of the fact that we were provided allotments. But to get back to Alan's letter, when he talked about that faith and what he believed and why we weren't on the Lapway, Nez Perce Reservation. But he continued in his letter, and he says, you know, I truly believe that, you know, I just wanted to share this with you relative to let you know that I know what the true story is. Our people have all given up that faith that way. And the heartache that I remember from some of our relatives in Lapway, they were stripped of all their things, buckskin dresses. They had to bury them. They had to burn them. They said, no more, you can't have this way of life. You're now part of the Christian religion. And in our people's way, our kutsa, with the dress that I have on and the moccasins, our kutsa never wore civilian clothes ever in her life. She wore moccasins every day, wore wing dress every day. And so did our alats, the paternal grandmothers. They all wore wing dresses. And that's what I recall as a young person of all the people that I grew up with. And they all truly believed in the Wallowas, our longhouse ways. And one of the things Albert talked about was becoming a leader of our longhouse. This is not something we vote on. Like, oh, I like Albert, I think I'll vote for him. But in a way, our mother shared with me and some others, and our aunts were sitting with us. She said, I have fear that later in Albert's life, when he gets older, he will become the next leader. It's a hard place to be. She said that our Kalatsa was a leader. Next would have been our father, Albert Andrews Sr. He would have been the next leader, and then Albert. So it's shared through bloodline. And I know that Albert has been working with his son, Jim. He's preparing him because he will be next. And our mother had hoped that we'd continue and carry that way. The picture you saw of our mother, she was taught a lot about the Longhouse ways and all the songs. All the songs are prayers, and you'll hear one as we leave today. One of the things that happened with my mother in getting groomed to be the leader of the ladies who gather foods and work for the Longhouse. She was named as the leader of our Longhouse for the women. But not only that, she was named the bell ringer. And I don't know if many of you have seen the blessed services, but there is a bell ringer who will stand by the leader. And that was her role, along with our Aunt Ann George. She was also named a bell ringer. And that's done in the same way. You're gifted with a bell and told that this is what you will do. But with all that, I recall growing up in the old Longhouse. It was just a small building. But all of our people that gathered there for Sunday services or different gatherings like Indian New Year. We celebrate Indian New Year December 21st. That's our New Year. It's the turning. We prepare ourselves for the new foods. But learning, through Albert and coming here, I still get excited when I come to this valley. I think of all the people here, our ancestors, and the people who are buried here. But working where I'm at now for the Sahaptin coordinator, I've learned a great deal about our people, but also the Palouse people. Our Palaka was Palouse, and our Ala, which is our paternal grandmother, was Palouse. But one of the things that my Aunt Ann and my mother shared with me was that my father, Albert Andrews Sr., and my mother, Virginia, they were going to get married. But my Kalatsa and my Palaka, Charlie Kamaikan Williams, they wanted to have a meeting. You can't get married until we have this meeting. The reason they wanted to have that meeting is because they thought they were related. They said, and my Aunt Ann laughed because she says, yeah, they really watched that really close. And so when they had that meeting, they learned that my Kalatsa was adopted by one of Joseph's wives. So he was not blood related. Whereby our mother, through our Katsa, was blood related. So they allowed them to get married. I've never shared this story, but this is what I was told by my aunt and my mother. And I thought that was a beautiful thing because I hadn't known. And so some of the things that they have shared, not only that, but this letter from Saluskin, has really opened up my eyes about, who we are as a people. Today, on the Colville Indian Reservation, there's about 1,500 Chief Joseph Band members. About 500 of them are off reservation. And there must be about 30 to 40 who are enrolled on the Colville Indian Reservation, but they live in Lapwai, which is ironic, but that's our relatives. But one of the things I shared at a meeting that I'd like to share right now, Albert had shared that our Katsa, they never drove a car. They didn't own a car. So what Katsa would do is get on a bus. I'd go with her. We'd go stay in Umatilla in Pendleton to visit our relatives. We'd visit for a week, then we'd get back on a bus and go back home. One of the things that happened is when we'd get there, we'd go into the home, and my aunts or whoever greeted us, they would go up to my katsa and they'd start weeping. They would cry. And I never understood why they did that. Then she would go down to Lapway, get on the bus, go to Lapway. We'd stay there for a week. But the same thing would happen. We'd get there, go in the home. Her niece, Annie, would come up to her and they'd start weeping. And I often wondered why they were crying. Later on, our mother shared with us, it's because we're all separated as a people. We're all split apart. We can't see each other every day. And so when you go visit them, it's because they miss each other. They miss each other dearly. And so because of this, sometimes you have that anger. And why? Why did this happen to our people? But as I learned, and I'm still learning, and I love that I was able to walk into Rich's Josephine Center. He's got a little candy store down there. I was walking with him and I kept stopping and it'd leave me behind because I just wanted to look at everything. But you know, I pray and I hope that I can learn from this man, but not only him, but to be invited back here. Mary Hawkins and Angela have been really great in working with me and inviting us here. And I've learned so much about the Nez Perce Trail in my work. And I hope and pray one day I'll be able to go on that trail. We've been to Bear Paw, not for the commemoration, but just to be there. Sadly enough, our mother brought us there. I was so young, I barely remember, but I remember her weeping there and singing there. But one of the things that I learned from that visit and our people that were buried there and visiting Umatilla and getting that confirmed from one of our relatives. He says, we have a relative there that's buried. Her name was Intita. She was buried with her child. She was killed there. That's where they buried her. So to me that, you know, is something that's really hard to really understand, and you think about your own. You look at your own family and wonder, I wouldn't ever want that to happen, for our people to go through that. And you kind of think and wonder as you travel, even being here and being able to see the land. When my last visit here, we went on a tour, And Joe Whittle, he knows this valley and he brought us. But you could hear it in the winds, and I don't know if you're ever familiar with that feeling. But I could feel it up there in the hills and the mountains. And it made me feel that way. And I wanted to cry, but I know that, in our teachings. So I had my nephew sing. But just being here on this land and seeing, because my first thought was our people, how they had to walk in those valleys, walk through treacherous places to get away. Then I think about the winter months and the things that they had gone through. And without knowing and what I would say today, that's what I wanted to share. It was probably a lot of the heart feelings about our people. And I continue to learn each day, because one of the greatest things that I hope will happen is that my children and my grandchildren will learn every bit that we have, not only in what Albert talked about is the protection of some of the graves, some of the sites where they want to build or they want to make changes. Because some of the artifacts and some of the things that are found are sometimes displayed. And this is the thing that our mother argued about. She says, no, those things have meaning to us as Indian people. They're sacred. So it's ironic that I find myself dealing with those on a daily basis in my new job. It's things that are happening along the trail. And I didn't know that we still had an interest in that. But I get really happy when we can deal with it. And one of the things that I was sharing with our council, I said, I pray and I hope that one day, in a go with all the other bands of the Nez Perce, and those knowledgeable people that I've met through time, people like Rich, he's got a lot of knowledge, Albert, but to understand that one day, I hope all these people can get together from Umatilla, the Nez Perce, and our people, to create a curriculum for our youth. They're supposed to teach culture and history in our schools. It's a new law. And this is what I hope for, that we can build that curriculum about our people. That we each add our own piece so that they understand and know the true story. This is one of the things that when we met the Canadian relatives, one of the ladies told me, we need to stand up and tell our own story, the true story of our people. And I told her, you and Albert need to sit down and write a book. She laughed and she said, we need to do something. But when I share bits and pieces with my kids, I told them, this is what I hope for. Because as time goes on, my great-grandchildren, I have one great-granddaughter. Like Albert said, I'm winning in the grandchildren. I have 17 grandchildren. And I told my kids that I hope one day we can't write everything down, but excuse me. I hope that there's someday a history book written just for the people so that they can learn. So I think this is as much as I can share right now. I'm trying to remember everything, but I do know that, knowing and understanding and learning about the members on the Caldwell Indian Reservation, I'm starting to gather their thoughts and their feelings, their stories. So this is a good thing. And we've had meetings about bear paw, so we've been in Umatilla, we've been in Lapwai. So those are good things that we're finally starting to get together as a people. We might not agree, but we still get together, we get to see each other. So, as a young person, I just want to share this piece about our wing dresses. We went to a funeral in Lapwai, and as a teenager, I thought, oh, I don't want to wear my wing dress. I want to wear my, clothes that I just bought. And so I didn't put my wing dress on, and we were all getting ready to go, and my mother saw me. She asked me to go back in the room we were staying in. She said, I want you to put your wing dress on. And I looked at her and I just nodded my head. I thought, oh gosh. Anyway, I looked at her and I said, okay, I'll change. And she says, one of the things I want you to understand is the reason you wear that dress is to honor that one that passed. You're not dressing for the people. You're dressing for that one. And that's your relative. We're going down there and we're going to honor that person today. So from that day forward, in anything I do, I have to remember her words. So I want to share that much with you, and that our people still continue this way. And there's days I'm thankful that our people that chose to go with Joseph, even though we live on the Caldwell Indian Reservation, that we still have our way. And our mother truly believed in this way and always talked to us about, if you're ever lonely, if you ever have a hard time in your life, remember those songs. Remember your way. Remember where you came from and remember who you are. And she was really strict with us about our faith and the way we practice. She said, no shortcuts. We always try to find that easy way. No, you got to do it this way. Okay, but I've learned from a good teacher. So I want to thank you for inviting us and giving us this little time to share. And I hope to keep coming back. I told Albert, well, I want to come back next week. As I want to hear the last person's presentation. And like I said, I wanted to come to every one of them. But thank you, Rich, for inviting me. See out here.
Thank you.
This little video is one they prepared. And the subtext here, the longhouse at Caldwell burned down how many years ago? About 8?
2012, I believe.
2012? So 6 years ago, the longhouse burned down. And they're in the process of collecting insurance and raising money and doing things to rebuild it. And this little video was prepared to them to take out to do that.
I retired a while back. I was the manager of the language program for the Colorado Tribe. And like I said, I'm 75 years old. And had planned to work until I retired and all that stuff. And then I had a heart attack. Recovered from that. He gave me guidelines which to follow. And so I went along for about 2 or 3 more months and I had another one. My son came to me in the ER and Ronnie was there with my ex-wife. Anyway, my son was one of the first ones in the room. And he was pretty serious when he started talking with me, not joking or anything. He says, "Dad, I think it's time." And I agreed with him, so I retired. What they found was I had 2 blockages in my heart. One was 90% closed, the other one was 70. They brought me in, put a stent in, they said 90% closure, and they left the other one okay. Since that time, I started exercising. I'm more fit now than I've ever been most of my life. But I have to tell you, just a little while ago, standing, I began to have this heavy feeling, and the sweat started breaking out. And they are signs that I was taught to recognize. I'm thankful to Ted, because I just remembered that I did bring some nitroglycerin. So I just had a shot, so I'm good as new. The reason I wanted this picture shown, we have forbidden, like my sister said, any picture taking, and especially any recording of songs. Our teaching tells us you don't record these songs. They're brought back from a certain place that we don't reveal. And they're considered very sacred. And the way I tell people today, if you wish to record, do so in here. Listen to it, maybe sing it, but record it in here. We're told they are deep and strong prayer songs. This man came around from the National Geographic wanting to do a story on our people. He interviewed various elders and he stayed amongst us for quite a while. We told him of these things. He's trying to record somebody else. How this came to be. It's a long distance shot. He had a telescopic lens and he was on the periphery of the cemetery. We found this out later. And he was on one side of the cemetery outside the fence line. Nobody knew he was there. That's how this picture was taken. And at first, the reaction was, no, we don't want this printed. Well, it was already printed. This is our mother. Our aunt, our other aunt, she's the Agnes. She came down with us and she saw the deer stick its head inside the window and nestle her hand. This is the other aunt back here, you can see her hand. But they tended to be the 4 that carried the strength of the service. They tended to embody the heart of the Wallowas for us. They often tell me how gentle I was in the teaching and carrying on of services. I attribute that to our kata. Her name was Alalimtai. Her English name was Susie Williams. My sister's English name is Veronica Susan. So she takes her name, middle name, from this grandma. The grandma was not strict. She's the one who brought us to those churches. She wanted us to see how people prayed. She wanted us to know that there's something greater than us, that there is a greater power. In our belief, there is no hell. In our belief, there is a beautiful place, Alit, and that is for which we work. That instead of this hell, there's a place we need to work through if we've committed transgressions in our life. And when we pass, we have to work our way through those. It's been said that you see things before you go. Everything you've done, everything you've said, even everything you've thought, who you hurt, who hurt you. Lately you've seen books come out now on near-death experience and they say the same thing. Someone brought me a book and said, hey, look at this. I read it through and I said, yeah, we knew that already. That is our belief system. Here's what we've grown up with. And that's why we view these things as very sacred when we sing the songs of our home. But like I said, there's the strength of our home. A relative who once lived the White Swan Longhouse came to our home one time and observed us carrying on a service and dinner. Over the dinner he stood. His name was Russell Jim. And he talked to the people. And says, you know, you see us here, all the drummers sitting beside him. It's all us men sitting here, looking self-important, looking out at the people like we're it sometimes. When the truth is, you see these ladies walking amongst you. They're bringing you water. They're bringing you some more food. They're asking you, are you comfortable? Do you need this or that? That's these ladies. He said, they're back there. They're washing dishes now. It says, these ladies are the backbone of our people. They help us stand so we can sit here regally and pretend like we know everything. So I carry his words in my heart to help humble me if my head gets too big. These are the things we're taught and how we're taught. To bring humility to what it is we do. There's nothing grand about what I say or do. Because a lot of times what I do say, do and say have been taught to me. It is now my responsibility to share that back, particularly with my children. My work isn't going to be as hard as Ronnie's. I only have 7 grandchildren. Yeah, 17. But I dare say she's up to the task. She's doing well. She's come a long way. And it's good to see her stand and talk the way she did today. I'm gratified. So, because of what my Kata taught us, because of what she taught us, she was a leader, extraordinary. If you want to look for significance and recognition by people other than your own home, you should have been to her funeral. That hall was filled. with people from the Umatilla, from the Yakima, from the Wanapum, all the river tribes were there represented. And the songs on and on and on. It was once said, you can sing one song and it won't be heard all the rest of the evening. Different song each time. And they would sing 21 at a time. Nowadays we can barely do 7, 12. Those people stood and they sang those songs into the night and into the day. And the body went into the ground. And we took care of the living. This is what we're taught in our home, in our Wallowas. So we'd like to share with you one of those songs to help close. And I'll speak in Indian as I do so. What I'm about to say is we're going to go ahead and sing. I'll ask my sisters to speak. So in this way we'd like to close. But in doing so, once again, thank you, Rich, for what you've done. Thank you, Ted, for helping me today. I really like his Facebook page.
It's funny, isn't it?
We'll cut off the